Hello, and welcome to this episode of Leadership and Aviation Podcast. I believe that leadership begins at a very early age. And so I've invited Carley Walker, who's the Director of Development for STEM Flights, to join me today to talk about what they're doing to attract youth to aviation, and then how leadership can be a part of the development of students as they begin their career or even exploration of a career in aviation. Carley, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, René. I'm so thrilled to be here and talk about youth in aviation and youth development.
Well, start at the beginning with that so everyone knows where you're coming from. What does your organization do?
Sure. So STEM Flights is a national nonprofit, and it was started in 2018 by my dad. He is a retired fighter pilot. And what do fighter pilots do when they get grounded? They buy Cessnas and fly around. So that's what he did. And his passion was introducing aviation to students in a very informal way, friends, family, this type of thing. Over the years, he kept hearing these stories of these students coming back and saying, Brew, which was his call sign, that flight that you took me on really inspired me. And now I've joined the military and I fly C-130s, or now I'm in business aviation, or now I'm working on Capitol Hill, because when I took that flight with you, I felt so inspired to do something more or to get into aviation careers. So my dad decided to take this idea of a flight experience and introducing youth to aviation careers and STEM careers through an awesome flight experience. And he wanted to formalize it. So he started a 501c3. And we all thought, to be honest with you, this is dad's fun little hobby. And we all helped out on the weekends and, helped him build the website, and something really interesting happened. It started organically growing. We were having pilots from other states signing up. We were having students reach out from all over the country, and we started very organically growing and expanding our program all throughout the country. And the missions that we provide these students are leaning on volunteer pilots throughout the country to deliver a STEM flight experience, similar to some other flight experience nonprofit organizations throughout the United States. But we wanted to take it a step further and require our students to do some online learning before they even meet with their pilot. And then STEM Flights wants to answer that question. Okay, what's next? I'm glad you had a great flight experience. I'm glad we blew your mind. I'm glad you got to go to the airport in your community and learn why that's important. But now what? What do we do now? And I think we're all trying to answer that question, including the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. How do we take people to that next step, especially students? So that is our goal, and our mission is to answer that question. What's next? What type of careers can we talk to you about? What pathways can we help send you down? And it's not just creating more pilots, which of course we need, but the mechanics and the engineers and the designers and the support staff in the aviation industry that we need. So STEM Flights really wants to promote all of those careers and just introduce them to students that might not have known about it before. Another critical part too is some of the students that we reach and that we touch didn't even know there was an airport in their community, don't even understand what airports do for their community, don't understand business aviation and how important that is to our country and business. So that's part of our mission too, is bringing those students out and highlighting aviation as a whole, as an industry, and how important it is to their life.
That is so important. And thank you for the work that you do in that area. I think if there was one organization like this for every airport, think how different the preconceived notions would be about having those local airports and maybe having those little planes fly overhead, and how important that is, not just to our local communities, but to the national development of aviation innovation, and even our national security depend upon those small airports and those young pilots learning how to fly. I know one of the things that we looked at a lot with the Women in Aviation Advisory Board, and I know that the Youth in Aviation Task Force is looking at some of the same things, is the importance of mentorship in creating the leaders in aviation of the future. Can you talk a little bit about how your organization does that? Obviously, you've had your dad as a mentor throughout your career. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on mentorship.
Right. I think you nailed it, René. Mentorship is so important as you move through your career, whether you're a pilot or whether you're an executive in the aviation industry, and starting those students young with this idea of mentorship. And that's why we call our volunteer pilots pilot mentors. And what we ask them to do is not only deliver a flight experience, we want to take this one step further than you're getting a joy ride today in an aircraft. Although that's important for maybe reaching a larger audience on a special event day, we want STEM flights to really bring that mentoring aspect in. So what we ask our pilots to do is not only deliver a flight experience and share their passion for aviation, but also impart on the students that they're connected to what are some life choices that you made in your life that have allowed you to be a pilot, be in this industry, own your own aircraft, have a hangar space? What are some things that you did, and how did aviation shape your life? Because not all of our pilot mentors are in the aviation industry as a profession. Many of them do it on the side. Many of them, it's just a weekend hobby. And that's still incredibly important to impart on these students their life philosophy and why aviation was helpful to them in whatever career that they're in. And we really want those mentors to have that experience with that student and stay connected. So when I have a pilot volunteer or a pilot mentor, flying for us in California, he's connected to that student before and after the flight experience, to the parent and the guardian anyway. And there's a lot of times that our pilot mentors get follow-up questions from the family, and then they can help them also walk down that pathway. So not only as an organization do we want to help answer those questions of what's next, but I'm going to put you in the cockpit with a pilot mentor who's passionate about aviation, who has experience in this industry. And that mentorship is really sort of meant to stay with you indefinitely.
I love that. Will you tell me some of the leadership lessons that you've learned from your dad, who was a fighter pilot, as working with him, growing up with him? I want to hear some of those lessons from you. I think that person aspect is really important.
Yes. So I am so lucky that I get to do this with my dad. And we both feel very lucky. Obviously, we get along really well and we're good friends. But watching him as a young person and with his career in the military, which, by the way, René, I feel like I should point out, with all the Top Gun fuss and the excellent movie that Maverick was, my dad was a fighter pilot in his late 20s, early 30s when that original movie came out. And he thought he was so cool, which he was. I was a really young child at the time. But he walked around in his flight suit and lived in it. And, I was like, oh my gosh, you must have thought you were so amazing. He's like, I did. I thought it was so cool. So that's how I got to grow up. But, I think dad's leadership lessons, that I was able to garner from him, on a personal level, are this notion of giving back. And we have to give back to inspire the next generation. It's kind of self-serving when we're looking at bringing these kids up, right? Because we have to have that aviation industry moving forward. We need those pilots, we need those mechanics, we need those women and that diversity in this industry. So it's slightly selfish, I guess, when you're looking at it from the way you and I do, that we need more of this in our industry. But it's also giving back and trying to inspire those kids. We always say, and Dad feels this way too, if we inspire a student to join the aviation workforce or become a pilot, that's great. But more importantly, if we can inspire them to just do a little bit more than they thought they could, getting them up above the clouds, up above their city, looking down and realizing my problems aren't that big. There's a whole nother world out there, and whatever's bringing me down in my school or my home or my community, I can rise above that. And I think that's an important lesson that we impart on these kids. And a leadership lesson that I learned from my dad is, you need to figure out a way to give it back, pay it forward, and keep it moving.
Wow, that is so powerful. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Carley. I feel the same way. And I was at an event this past weekend, and the speaker was talking about encouraging someone or inspiring someone. And he said the difference is you speak words of encouragement to someone and they feel better about themselves when you encourage them. And you've used this word several times, inspiring. And inspiring is encouraging plus the call to take action. And it sounds like that's really what STEM Flights is all about. It's not just about encouraging someone to see the world in a different way. It's encouraging them to see the world in a different way and do something about it, whether it's to take a different approach to their life or it's to take a aviation career track and make a lifetime passion of this thing that we call aviation. So I'm thrilled to hear you use that word. And it sounds like there really is a lot of action that goes along with this. I think I would ask you if you could come up with two or three things that you think a young person, 15 or 16-year-old young person could do to set themselves up for success now in a career in aviation, whatever form that career might take. What would it be? What would you go back and tell your 15 or 16-year-old self?
Yeah, that is such a great question, and I'm going to refer a little bit to the Women in Aviation Advisory Board recommendations, because I thought those were so great, and especially where the board talks about the compounding barriers at that age that we're targeting. So, that 11 to 18, that middle school, and I think what the advisory board figured out too is that it starts a lot earlier than that in the general awareness and the exposure to why is there an airport in my community? What does it do? What are these people flying around for? And then, going on that confidence gap that the advisory board targeted, and the lack of parent-child awareness and the lack of teacher and educational awareness, sort of at that age where those students are looking at those careers. And one of the things I would recommend to those students is learning more about that. But how do we do that? How do you learn about something that you don't know exists? And that's where I would lean on people in the aviation industry, not just pilots, but all of us, to figure out, how can I raise awareness in my own community? How can I host a tour at the local airport? How can I get some information in the hands of the local school counselors? And I think that we all have a calling to do this, and we all have a responsibility to make that happen in our own individual communities. STEM Flights as an organization is a great opportunity for students to have a flight experience. But if there's not a STEM Flights operating at your local airport, or I don't have a pilot volunteer, I think that all of us collectively have a responsibility to be reaching out in our own communities to just even disseminate the information or host something at the local airport just for fun, just to get those students out. So I would, I guess, to answer your question, some things I would recommend is seeing your local airport and what happens out there, looking at opportunities that you could explore in this career. And it doesn't just have to be a pilot. Something that you and Allison McKay, the executive director of Women in Aviation, were talking about recently on a podcast was, when we're focusing so much on STEM, sometimes we're eliminating some of that population of girls that might think, oh, I'm not a STEM person or I'm not great at this. So I think it's on all of us to show the different parts of this aviation industry that aren't just STEM. And you don't just have to be a pilot. I mean, that's a really cool part of it, but there's so many other opportunities that we need supported in this aviation. I mean, take myself as an example. I develop a nonprofit. I'm in the aviation industry, but I'm not necessarily down a STEM trajectory or a pathway. And I think it's important to dispel those myths about it as well. And even though my organization is STEM Flights, we know STEM is a buzzword in education, and we know that it's important to grasp the attention of educators because that's what they want fulfilling experiences for students to be about learning. But there's so many other aspects of STEM, and we can even add that art into it, right? So it's STEAM, to really kind of reach out and encourage those girls and those young boys that might be deterred by that.
I think that's so great. I think the theme that I heard there, as far as advice to the next generation, to those who might be considering a career in aviation, is to have a sense of curiosity and to do your own homework and find answers if you have questions about aviation. But then you took that question a step further, which I love, and answered the question, what can we as leaders in aviation be doing to attract the next generation? And one of the things that we don't do well as an industry that I really think that we need to do is approach schools and guidance counselors and say, hey, what questions can I answer for you about aviation? Because there are amazing careers in aviation, and I'd love for you to be encouraging your students to participate in that. And I think just taking that step, that initiative to meet guidance counselors or do some outreach as a part of your local airport is really vital advice. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I would just like to offer to aviation professionals, if they don't know where to start in their community, and this is something that they want to do, STEM Flights can help with that too. And we utilize volunteers in a lot of different ways, not just our pilot mentors, but we have helped others in their communities that want to help. They might not be able to fly students. Maybe they're not a pilot, or maybe they don't own an aircraft, but they want to be involved, and we can help with that type of information. Here's what you can take to a guidance counselor. Here's how we approach schools. Here's the executive director of the local airport in your community, and they want to be involved. So we can help make some of those connections for those aviation professionals that want to do this in their communities. We can help walk you through that.
Awesome. Well, tell people how to get in touch with you and how to get involved in STEM Flights.
Yeah. So stemflights.org is our website. And anyone can go there and find me very easily. They can read about our mission statement. They can read about how we got started, what exactly we do. And we're in 32 states across the United States and growing. So we would love to have anyone in the aviation workforce who's interested in giving back or getting involved in their community to promote aviation careers. We can help you with that, whether you're a pilot and you want to donate a flight experience, or whether you're just passionate about this and want to reach girls in your community or boys in your community, or all of the above. We can help you make those connections.
Awesome. Carley, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I appreciate you, and look forward to hearing about expansion to all 50 states and even outside of the border of the United States.
Thanks, René. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to watching you and the group continue to grow, and we're huge supporters of the advisory board.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.